All right, good morning. Okay, if you remember last week, we took a detailed look at Isaiah chapter 51. Okay, and we saw that right in the middle of the servant songs, we have a divine call to the faithful remnant of Israel to remember God's power and justice. So that's what chapter 51 was communicating to, and we understand that chapter 51 is addressed to the faithful remnant of Israel, or those who follow righteousness, those upon whose hearts is God's law, right? So this morning what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at Isaiah 52 verses 1 through 12, and the fourth and final servant song actually starts at chapter 52 verse 13. So we're not going into the fourth servant song this morning. But this passage here is very significant, and you'll understand as kingdom believers why this is very effective in bridging chapter 51 and the servant song found in chapter 50 to the final servant song that begins after this. This is very important and very significant, and it does effectively bridge and tie all of this together. And in my opinion, it's only kingdom believers that are going to be able to grasp that concept, and you'll see that this morning. So this passage is part of a larger section that we started last week in Isaiah 51 that contains messages of comfort, redemption, and restoration for Zion. And it also precedes the servant song, which has profound messianic prophecies in it. That's the fourth servant song. And this passage we'll study this morning sets the stage for all of that. And you'll see that as we go along. So let's look at Isaiah 52, verses 1 and 2. Awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion, put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city, for henceforth there shall no more come into thee the uncircumcised and the unclean. Shake thyself from the dust, arise, and sit down, O Jerusalem. Loose thyself from the bands of thy neck, O captive daughter of Zion. Daughter of Zion. Immediately, we should understand that the time element here as end time prophecy, right? Because this is not the old mother. Okay? So, this awake, awake, that carries over from what we were studying last week. So, awake, awake, and you notice it's been repeated here, so it's an imperative. Last week we saw the same or similar language in Isaiah 51, verse 9 says, awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Arm of the Lord, this shows us an agency, all right? Awake as in the ancient days. And remember, he reminded us of our history about the Exodus and our deliverance there. And then in verse 17 of Isaiah 51, we also see the phrase again, awake, awake, stand up, O Jerusalem. So here we can see this is a repetition. It's carried over into chapter 52, and the people being addressed remains the same. Except in this case, we see the people being addressed here are the captive daughter of Zion. Okay, and we'll get into that more as we go along this morning. So, this is the addressed here, of course, is the new covenant community, right? The new covenant community. And when I say community, I mean the called out ones, those remnant of Israel, all right? So awake, awake is, like I said, a repeated imperative functioning as what? What's that doing for us? What's that telling us to do? For this entity here, Zion, to be roused, perhaps, right? Because there's been a change in their station. A turning point has been implied here, right, so far. All right. Put on strength. Put on thy strength, O Zion. Put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. Okay? So what's that saying? Zion is now being personified as a woman dressing for a new status, right? Does this remind you guys of any similar prophecies that contain similar language? Anybody? Revelation 21, 1 and 2. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. Not gone, not destroyed, not annihilation, restored. And there was no more sea, and I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Is that what Isaiah is telling us? And of course, we see the subject matter has not changed. This is the New Jerusalem. These are the future plans for this city, Jerusalem, that Isaiah is talking about as well. right? So these garments symbolize purity, dignity, right? Restoration. Now, who is the husband? Who is the bridegroom? Okay, all right. How many husbands do we have? One. How many gods do we have? Okay, one. So actually, we tried to have more than one husband, and it got us into a situation, right? So there is only one king. There's only one God. God is one, right? That's our husband. So Zion, of course, here we see these beautiful garments. We understand these will be wedding garments, right, for future restoration. She's here dressing in these because why? She'll be married to the king, right? And she'll come singing and dancing, right? Okay, that's Hosea. All right, now, this restoration of Zion, Jerusalem, would be a royal restoration then, since we will be married to the king. Okay? So there is a change in status that's going to occur for whoever this Zion and Jerusalem are, this captive daughter. Okay? And here we see, put on strength, put on new garments. You're going to your wedding. There's that holy city John saw. And then he says, for henceforth there shall no more come into thee the uncircumcised and the unclean. Okay, now are there prophecies that we can have witnesses to this? Okay, now what is going on? Now remember, David at the time called Goliath what? Uncircumcised. Remember that? And Zion will be free from what then? Uncircumcised unbelievers, foreign oppressors, foreign powers, and sin, right? Uncircumcised, most often in the Bible, is symbolic of foreign oppressors. Okay, think of your Philistines. And then the unclean, of course, those impure. Joel says something like this, and it helps us quite a little bit. Joel 3, verse 16 and 17, the Lord also shall roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So shall ye know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then shall Jerusalem be holy, and there shall no more strangers pass through her anymore. Is that what Isaiah is saying? About there no more being the uncircumcised or unclean in that holy city? And remember, the New Testament speaks of that holy city as a place where the redeemed dwell. It's the same city. Always is. So, if you read this chapter of Joel in its entirety, you'll quickly understand and realize that this is also end-time prophecy. Okay, I'm not going to go into that. Just take my word for it, okay? This time element in Joel 3 is end-time prophecy. And as such, it does serve as an excellent second witness to what Isaiah has told us about this city of Zion and Jerusalem, right? That it will be divinely restored. And remember that Isaiah said the uncircumcised and the unclean would not be present in this new or restored city of Jerusalem. But Joel here says that no strangers will be there. Is that the same thing? Some people get hung up on this. They really do. Well, that word strangers is coming from Hebrew 2:114, zor, right? To be a stranger, to estrange, to turn aside, to be foreign, to be strange, profane, or to commit adultery. Remember, the commit adultery would be those that offered strange fire. Remember that? Okay, so is this the same thing then that Isaiah is talking about? Those who are turned aside. Turned aside from what? The truth, the law, the king's highway, perhaps. Stranger could be foreigner as well. So apparently, this city of Jerusalem, the restored city of Zion and Jerusalem, is a place where people who understand and obey God's law live there exclusively. And of course, it's a place for Israelites only. Right? Okay. So we have an agreement between the prophets Joel and Isaiah. And of course, those prophets here, Joel and Isaiah, they do align with what John saw in Revelation, do they not? Okay. And then here in Isaiah 52, 1 and 2, we also see, shake thyself from the dust, arise and sit down, O Jerusalem. Shake yourself from the dust. What does that mean? What does dust represent in the Bible? I'm sure most of you can easily answer that quickly, right? Dust. So dust, if we go to Job, and of course we know the story of Job, right? by this time, Job, was an upright and righteous man, by the time we get to Job 2, he has lost his wealth, he's lost his children, and he's lost his servants, right? By the time we get here to 2 verse 9, Job has been afflicted from head to toe with boils, right? And he's actually sitting in ashes, scraping his sores with broken pottery, okay? So here we see Job, verse 2, 9 and 10. Job chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. But he said unto her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What, shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. Right? So notice his wife here, after witnessing Job's suffering, she essentially tells him to give up on life and his faith. Right? Of course, Job rebukes his wife not for being a woman, okay, not for being a woman, but for speaking as one of the foolish women, right? So foolishness, senselessness, someone lacking wisdom or ethical and spiritual understanding, perhaps, right? Someone who speaks or acts contrary to God. Often in the Bible, foolishness is characterized by arrogance, irreverence, or lack of discernment, right? So that was what Job's wife is guilty of here. So his wife spoke foolishly, so she was acting from a place of despair and spiritual blindness, right? Then Job says what? What, shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? Okay, now of course we see this as a rhetorical question, which points us to what? Job's acceptance of God's sovereignty over both blessings and hardships. And I hazard to say a great many of our modern Christians could afford to understand what Job knew. As a matter of fact, Job looked forward to a mediator. He looked forward to salvation. He looked forward to the resurrection, and he understood the state of the dead. Job, right? So let's look at Job 2. Verse 11 through 13. Now when Job's 3 friends heard all this evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. For they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off and knew him not. I mean, Job was in such a bad place. His own friends didn't recognize the man. Remember, he's been struck with boils. They lifted their voice and wept. They rent every one of his mantle and sprinkled dust upon their heads. There's dust upon their heads toward heaven. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. Okay? Now, there's certainly a great amount of study that could go into these few verses, but we're not going to get into that this morning. Okay? Yet before we move on from Job, I would like to say a few things about that book. It's a very profound book. It's misunderstood a lot of times. It's rarely mentioned, rarely read from pulpits anymore. It has 42 chapters, and it's written in an ancient poetic language, which is sometimes why Job is contested to be the oldest book in the Bible, by the way, the ancient poetry that's found in it. And that ancient language, coupled with the fact that most of it is speeches that seem repetitive and even confusing at times, is why I believe it's not brought up at pulpits anymore. As a matter of fact, I don't think modern ministers know what to do with Job at all. You don't hear it much in the kingdom ministry either. Not a whole lot. Another reason I think why you don't hear preaching out of Job in this age is that the book of Job doesn't really fit into the framework of what the modern churches teach, almost to exclusivity, which would be the life of Jesus, the teachings of Paul, and the general gospel message. Job doesn't do a whole lot to help that. You see, it really doesn't. Like I said, I don't think they know what to do with much of it. Job, in my experience, when it comes to the Christian life, Job, in the book of Job, usually raises more questions than it answers. A lot of times, Now, America's Promise has never been a church that just focuses on the easy or the familiar verses of the Bible. This ministry and I as well strive to root God's people in all of God's word. So Job isn't something that we would shy away from at all, even though it does have difficult portions. Now, Job is a book of the Bible for a reason, okay? And there is significant typology to be found in Job. There really is. You just have to know where to look. And typology, of course, is when a person or event in the Old Testament foreshadows a greater fulfillment, okay? Usually a prophetic one found in the New Testament or expressed in the ages to come. Okay, so a symbol, a pattern, a model. And Job, so before dismissing the book of Job or the story of Job, is it possible that it's more than just a story of an individual man's suffering? Is Job a type that shows us the redemptive mission of Christ? Or the prophetic path of the believing remnant of Israel? Is it possible? We have a righteous sufferer, Job, right? Now, Job is described as blameless and upright. He was not sinless, but he's morally righteous, right? Job suffers not for sin, but as a divine purpose, correct? Of course, this word evil, which we've run into twice already, this word evil here is not necessarily moral evil, okay? It's actually from the Hebrew ra, which means disaster, calamity, misfortune, suffering, adversity, okay? So the suffering Job endures is not due to sin, but for God's glory, right? So is Job a type of Christ? Is Job a type of daughter of Zion? Job is rejected, misunderstood, and accused. Is he not? If you remember the story, Job's friends, the three here, and the reason why they've given the location is it's to show that they did come from afar off to be with him. That's what the function of those other words are. But Job's three friends, these are the same ones throughout the story, by the way. While they do show up here with good intentions, we see later that what they say actually misrepresents God and further wounds Job. So you can't quote everything they said because they do misrepresent God. As a matter of fact, Job's friends here go so far as to assume that Job's suffering means his guilt. Right? That's what they say. But Job longs for vindication and restoration. Right? He later wishes for a mediator between himself and God. And that points to whom? Christ. This desperate hope is also found in the cries for justice that are found in the mouths of Israel. Read the Psalms of Lament. You'll see the same cries for justice. King David. Of course, these prayers also effectively mirror Christ's prayers. Okay? Job is restored at the end, is he not? He is both vindicated and restored by God, which of course is symbolic of a future hope of restoration for Israel as a matter of prophecy. Is it not? So Job is much, much more than a man suffering in isolation. There are patterns to be found throughout this book. Like I said, it's often missed. It's a preview of Christ's suffering and glory, right? But also a prophetic image of Israel's exile, suffering, and eventual redemption. If you think about the book of Job there, I'm sure you'll never think about it the same again now, right? Okay, so read Job with that in mind as a kingdom believer. If you understand this, then Job becomes a model for us as the remnant of Israel to endure our own suffering while awaiting our own restoration. Okay? Typology. Symbols and types. Anyway, if you'd like, one day we'll do that in depth, but not this morning. So there is a plethora of study that's been done in the book of Job. I feel like it's overdue because it's often missed, ignored, or omitted. So we're looking at these verses in order to determine actually what dust meant when it was mentioned in Isaiah chapter 52. Of course, here we see, shake thyself from the dust. Remember we heard that? A command for Zion to do that. And in Job we see that dust is symbolic of mourning, right? Other places it will be humiliation, and other places dust is symbolic of death. Okay, so from dust you came, from dust you'll go, right? Okay. So Isaiah 47:1 will actually show us another use of the word dust. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Now this is not the old Babylon. This is the new spiritual successor. Must be. What? Mystery Babylon. Now see, this mystery Babylon will be what? Brought low to the dust, to a place of humiliation, mourning, or death. Right? Sit on the ground, there is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. This is, of course, prophetic of the downfall and destruction of the end-time world power, Mystery Babylon. We'll not get into that this morning, but there's dust again. You see here it's used. It's a place of mourning, a place of humiliation, all in all, a place of a low status, to be brought low, okay? So in Isaiah 52, verses 1 and 2, this Zion is to find strength, put on new garments, rise metaphorically from the dust, or from her humiliation, her mourning, and of course her death as well, because remember, we were resurrected and made alive, quickened, were we not? Okay, why? Because there's something on the way. There's something on the way for you, Jerusalem, in Zion. So rise and what? Sit down, or other translations will say, be seated. Be seated. Zion, the holy city where God will dwell. Zion is the holy city where God will dwell with his people, is it not? So this Zion is told to rise up from your low station and sit down or be seated. Be seated. So this sit down suggests what? Once again, enthronement. Remember we talked about royal restoration. Even if the majority of Israel is ignorant of this, this will happen, okay? She's going to have what? Return to honor, right? Okay. And what we'll read in Ephesians says the same thing. Paul must have understood these things. Ephesians 2, verse 4 through 6. But God, who is rich in mercy, for his great love wherewith he loved us, who? Israel. Even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Christ. By grace you are saved, and has raised us up together and made us sit together in heavenly places in Christ. Heavenly places in Christ. What is that? The heavenly origin of that new city. Zion will sit with Christ. Where? In Zion, where God will dwell with us. Promise after promise after promise, repetition after repetition. There's so many Bible verses we could say that are witnesses of this. We wouldn't have time for 3 sermons worth of them, okay? So what we read in Ephesians, this sit down with Christ, this sit down daughter of Zion is a relationship then. I'd say a covenantal relationship, which of course that's what marriage is, right? And communion with God. He will dwell with us, right? Okay, and Israel means what? To rule with God. That makes perfect sense, does it not? It is in Israel's future, then, that God will restore us, we will be reconciled, we will be glorified with God, and we will be seated in his kingdom. Is that correct? Is this what Isaiah is telling us? Okay. We also see here, very easily, loose thyself from the bands of thy neck, O captive daughter of Zion. What's that? Loose thy bands from what? Who? Mystery Babylon. We're talking about the daughter of Babylon. So of necessity, we're talking about the daughter of Zion, end-time future prophecy. Now in the context of Isaiah's day, loose thyself from the neck of the captive Babylon, the exile. It's coming to an end. This is, like I said, a turning point for Zion and Jerusalem. So this is layered prophecy. So it applies to the people whose ears heard this the first time Isaiah spoke it. And of course, this is addressed in time regathered Israel. Right? So we're to do what? And you'll see more of this as we go along. Loose thyself. There would be a liberation then from what? Slavery, captivity, exile, right? There's also, if you understand, the bondage that Zion is currently in would also be a blindness as to their own identity, right? We'll get to that as well. All right, so Isaiah 52, verses 3 through 6. For thus saith the Lord, ye, daughter of Zion, have sold yourselves for naught, and ye shall be redeemed without money. For thus saith the Lord God, my people went down aforetime into Egypt to sojourn there, and the Assyrian oppressed them without cause. Now therefore, what have I here, saith the Lord, that my people is taken away for naught? They that rule over them make them to howl, saith the Lord, and my name continually every day is blasphemed. Therefore my people shall know that my name, therefore they shall know that in that day that I am he that doth speak. Behold, it is I. Okay. So, sold yourselves for naught, redeemed without money. What does that mean? What's going on here? Israel's punishment. Okay, this could be our current captivity, remember, layered prophecy, or their current exile, captivity under Babylon, the old city, was not due to a financial transaction. You see, and we studied this a few sermon songs ago. But Israel's current plight is due to what? Sin and rebellion. Okay? So, as such, our redemption is not a transaction or an act of commerce. It was done by God's grace. Peter understood these things. 1 Peter 1:18 and 19. For as much as ye know that you were not redeemed with corruptible things, as silver and gold, from your vain conversation received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. So this was not done as an act of commerce. This was done through grace. God chose Israel. Right? Okay. And here in Isaiah 52:3-6, we see, my people are blasphemed. All right, or my name is blasphemed. By whom? Well, he's talking about Egypt and Assyria. So what's going on here? This is a historical reference, right? He's reminding us of our history. Both Egypt and Assyria are mentioned here because these represent injustices done to the people of Israel, right? And the captivities that came upon them. And those nations actually mocked God because of Israel's suffering, if you recall, right? Now, does this have applications to us in this age? Are we laughed at when we tell people that we are the Israel people of the Bible and that this is God's nation? Do they mock us? Yes. Okay, so this, again, layered prophecy. So God's telling us, look, there were injustices done to you, so much so that the people who are over you or were over you, they mock my name continually every day. They blaspheme God. So Egypt and Assyria then are a type of captivity and exile mentioned here, right? And if we understand how our people were delivered from them by God, then they will serve as a model for us in understanding how Zion will be delivered at the end of this age. You see, that's almost always the operation of mentioning these entities to us as reciting history, because it will happen again much after the manner of Egypt. Do we not read that in other end-time prophecies? Okay, and this is where it gets interesting. Therefore, my people shall know my name, therefore they shall know it in that day that I am, that's right, that's the Hebrew, I am, he that doth speak, behold, it is I. This restoration, now look at what's going to happen here. Therefore my people, Israel, shall know. What? This restoration, the redemption that God has planned for Zion, Jerusalem, will identify who God's people actually are. This act, right? And this language here denotes or assumes a prior relationship. So this is a restored relationship with God and his people, even if his people don't know who they are, right? Never mind the other nations of the earth. His own people are blind to identity. And this act of God apparently will restore to Israel their identity, right? Because fulfilled prophecy is proof of that, right? And so the Israel people, as well as the entire world, will know who the covenant people are once and for all. Once and for all, because of what God plans to do with Zion and Jerusalem. Our job is to identify these people, right? And of course, give them the good news. Now, true Israel's identity will be restored along with Zion and Jerusalem, the holy city. Okay? Behold, it is I. What is he talking about here? Who does this redemptive work? Well, the I am. The king. the king is still on his throne. He's still present with Israel, right? He's still interested in the affairs of men. God is alive. And these promises that he speaks to us, it will be God who does these things. He is present, and he will be the one that does this. Now, that's good news, is it not? Especially if you know who these people are. Very good news. Now, look at the following verses then. On the tail of this good news, which speaks volumes to us because my people, we can identify. Right? Now look at the next verses, and you'll see why this does such an exemplary job of bridging the gap between the people in Isaiah 51 who said there was a restoration on the way. This is what I plan to do. And then the next servant song will tell us how it will be done. Apparently, there's going to be, well, we'll get there. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's very exciting things for in-time regathered Israel, is it not? Isaiah 52, verses 7 and through 10. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace, that bringeth good tidings of good, that publisheth salvation, that saith unto Zion, thy God reigns. Thy watchmen shall lift up the voice, with the voice together they shall sing, for they shall see eye to eye, when the Lord shall bring again Zion. Break forth in the joy, sing together, ye waste places of Jerusalem, for the Lord has comforted his people, he has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord has made bare his holy arm in the eyes of the nations, and at the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. Now, this is starting to tie it all together rather well, isn't it? So, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. So, it says that God reigns, right, unto Zion. Somebody, so this is a herald or a messenger of what? The gospel, right? The gospel. So this is a poetic celebration of an agent or herald or messenger who brings the gospel, and this messenger, you'll notice, seems to assert the kingdom of God, right? So I would say whoever this is, they're going to bring the kingdom gospel, the gospel of the kingdom, right? Because they're asserting God's kingdom on earth, by the way. Now, interestingly, Paul actually quotes this in Romans 10, okay? And he's actually applying this messenger to those who preach the good news of the gospel of the kingdom. And of course, that would be who? Kingdom ministers and kingdom believers. Paul was one, was he not? Okay, and it's our mission to carry on Christ's work, which, by the way, this messenger, this herald here, that's Christ, 100%. Paul then understands the work of Christ on earth and goes so far as to say, you who continue Christ's work are these people. Who? People who preach the good news of the gospel of the kingdom. That's what he's talking about. This is a composite of the gospel of the kingdom, is it not? Is it not? Okay, now who are these watchmen? Overcomers, of course, Israelites, right? This is Zion we're talking about. And they will see what? Well, the restoration of Israel and God's return, right? Those things go hand in hand at all times. So we can see through God's power in his return, the restoration of Zion, Jerusalem, and their salvation, all in the eyes of the other nations, you see. This transformation, this change of station with Zion and Jerusalem will be witnessed globally. The redemption and salvation of God's people. Good news indeed, right? Isaiah 52, verse 11 and 12. Depart ye, depart ye. Before we go on, this will happen, where your captivity will be loosened, because something's on the way that's going to cause this all to happen. Therefore, Israel, do what? Instructions are found in the last two verses of Isaiah 52. Depart ye, go ye out from thence, touch no unclean thing, go you out from the midst of her. What is that? Come out of her, my people. Is it not? Again, this links end time prophecy. Come out of her, my people. Because there's a way to do that now. The guy that brings the good tidings, right? Christ. Be ye clean that bear the vessels of the Lord. That bear the vessels of the Lord. What's that? Priesthood. Who was responsible for keeping the pots and pans and things clean? Priests. Now, who is it in the Bible that's a nation of kings and priests? Who is it that's promised to be restored and loosed from the mystery Babylonian captivity. God's kingdom of priests or God's nation of kings and priests. So here, that's a priesthood. This is instruction for the same people that have been addressed since chapter 51. Actually, the same people that are addressed throughout the entirety of the Bible, the people of the book. Okay? For you shall not go with haste, nor by flight, for the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel will be your rear guard. Okay, so this is talking about what? Depart out from there. Leave what? Babylon. Leave Babylon, okay? Revelation 18, come out of her, my people. Is that not what we're commanded to do? And that is a command, not a suggestion. You can't be a watchman and a Babylonian at the same time. Separate yourselves from Babylon, and we've talked about this before. Touch no unclean thing, be ye clean. He's not talking about physically moving out, is he? He's telling us not to touch unclean things, so that is bookended by this thing, which means that you are to be set apart from Babylon. What is the word for set apart, biblically? Holy, holiness, priests, right, that bear the vessels. Set apart, okay, be a priesthood. So be not part of Babylon or her systems. Dedicate yourselves instead to purity in the service of God, right? In time Israel, of course. Not in haste. You shall not go out with haste nor by flight. What's that mean all of a sudden? It's interesting. It really is. So this deliverance will be different from the Exodus in several ways. And it will also be similar in several ways, okay? So we won't be leaving with haste or urgency as we did when we flew from Egypt. Remember? Exodus 12. We didn't even have time to let the bread rise. We took the dough out of the pans. We had to tie up the utensils and put them on our backs as a makeshift preparation to get out of Egypt. We were doing this on the run with urgency. As a matter of fact, we just took everything we could get, put it on our backs and left, and in so doing, we looted Egypt. They wanted us out of town that badly, right? You remember that? As a matter of fact, taking the dough before it had time to rise is the reason why we have flatbread. Okay, and of course that is symbolic of the severing of the Israel people out from under the ways of Egypt, if you think about it. Okay, it all works together, symbols and types everywhere. All right, so we did not have the luxury of time when God delivered us from Egypt. We were on the run with all manner of haste. God says our future delivery will be peaceful and divinely guided. Okay, He will go out before us, right? Like the pillar of fire at night and the pillar of clouds at day. He'll go out before us, and also he will be our protector as well as the one who guides us. If you really think about the applications of this in this nation today, are we really going to run out of town with all manner of haste? Or is are we restoring unto Babylon double now, peacefully, in a transitional state that kingdom believers can put their finger on as a progression towards the kingdom? That the deliverance will be mighty, it will be magnificent in the way we were delivered from Egypt in the eyes of the nations, but it will be slightly different because we will not go with haste or by flight? Is that a progressive kingdom work that we see before our very eyes in this nation? That fits. That fits. I do not believe we will be called to vacate this country like we did. This country belongs to us. There's a difference. There's a difference. He told us we would not move from the place he gave us. That's what he said. Okay? So yes, it will be different. Not different as that there's no deliverance on our way, but the deliverance will be slightly different from the way it was conducted in the Exodus, but also God will then guide us and be our protector. Okay, and remember, this is a message of hope, comfort, and reassurance to the Israel people, specifically the daughter of Zion. All right? And of course, that's where we're going to stop today. All right? These 12 verses foreshadow the servant's initiative found in the next chapter. So here's the what's on the way and the why of it. The servant's mission and initiative in the next chapter is the how of it. It's the how of it. And you can see now why Isaiah 51 and 52 sets the stage for the servant found in chapter 53, who is, by the way, Christ and his mission on earth. You see how this sets the stage for what the impact Christ has upon his people Israel. You see, it all goes together. You can understand why these verses and chapters are often skipped in the modern church then, right? They're often skipped. These are a call to God's people to awaken to their redemption, to step out of bondage, turn to purity, and rejoice in God's reign. Right? So, like I said, this is a foreshadowing of the gospel, which is told in the final servant song, culminating in the suffering, victory, and global impact of the servant. And we'll study that next week. That's all I have for today.